The bruised purple clouds on the horizon matched Mabel Dawson's spirit as she raced her chestnut mare across the Wyoming prairie, desperate to outrun memories that clung to her like burrs. The year was 1878, and at 24 Mabel had already lived several lifetimes of sorrow, each one etched into the careful way she held herself, in the wariness that shadowed her hazel eyes. "Faster, Penny," she urged the horse, her long braid whipping behind her as thunder rolled in the distance. The small town of Cottonwood Springs lay 5 miles behind her, and freedom stretched ahead if only she could reach it before the storm broke. Rain began to pelt down as Mabel spotted a weathered barn in the distance. Relief flooded her as she guided her exhausted mount toward shelter. The large wooden doors stood partially open, and she slipped inside, the sudden quiet broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof and Penny's labored breathing. "Who's there?" A deep voice called from the shadows, causing Mabel to stiffen. "Just a traveler seeking shelter from the storm," she answered, her hand instinctively moving to the small knife hidden in her boot. A tall figure emerged from the back of the barn, lantern held high. The man's features came into focus: broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest, stubbled jaw, and eyes blue as a summer sky. A cowboy by the looks of his dusty boots and the hat he removed as he approached. "Wade Irving," he said simply. "This is my family's land." Mabel considered lying about her name. It had become second nature in the 3 months since she'd fled Kansas City, but something in his straightforward manner stopped her. "Mabel Dawson," she replied, leading Penny deeper into the barn. "I apologize for trespassing." "I'll leave once the storm passes." Wade shook his head, rainwater dripping from his dark blonde hair. "No need, storm looks to be settling in for the night. You're welcome to stay." Penny whinnied softly, drawing Wade's attention. "Your mare could use some rest and grain," he observed, moving to a barrel and scooping oats into a feed bag. "Been pushing her hard." "Hard enough," Mabel answered evasively. Wade didn't press further, just nodded as if her non-answer told him everything he needed to know. "There's fresh hay in that stall. I was just finishing evening chores when the clouds opened up." Mabel removed Penny's saddle while Wade tended to his own mount, a powerful black gelding. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but Mabel felt Wade's occasional glances like physical touches. "You've got a way with horses," he commented after watching her gentle handling of Penny. "My father raised quarter horses," she said, the memory bittersweet, "before he died." Wade hung the lantern on a hook and settled onto a hay bale. "I've got coffee in that pot by the small stove if you'd like some. It's not fancy, but it's hot." Hunger and thirst won over caution, and Mabel accepted a tin mug of the strong brew, keeping a careful distance as she sat on another bale. "Where you headed?" Wade asked, blowing steam from his own cup. "North," she said. "Montana territory maybe, long journey for a woman alone." Her spine stiffened. "I can manage." His eyes met hers, not challenging but assessing. "Never said you couldn't, just making an observation." The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. Lightning illuminated the barn through the cracks, followed by a crash of thunder that made Penny prance nervously in her stall. "Easy, girl," Mabel called, rising to soothe the horse. As she stroked Penny's velvet nose, she became aware of Wade watching her. Not in the way men usually watched her, with hunger or calculation, but with simple interest. "You running from something, Miss Dawson?" he asked finally. Mabel's hand froze on Penny's mane. "Isn't everyone?" Wade's laugh was unexpected, warm, and genuine. "Fair point. Around here, folks tend to be running to something or from something, sometimes both." "And which are you?" His smile faded slightly. "Bit of both, I suppose. War sent me running, and the promise of open land pulled me forward." "The war between the states?" Mabel asked, surprised. He didn't look old enough to have fought. "I was young," he said, reading her thoughts. 16 when I enlisted with the Union, 19 when I came home to nothing but ghosts." Mabel understood ghosts. They'd followed her from Kansas City, whispering in her ear during sleepless nights. "How long have you been here?" "My brother and I claimed this land 7 years ago. Built the main house, this barn, got about 200 head of cattle now." Pride colored his voice. "Tough going at first, but we're making it work." The rain eased somewhat and Wade rose to check outside. Storm's moving on, but it's full dark now. You're welcome to stay the night. House isn't far. My sister-in-law would welcome the company. Wariness returned. I'm fine here with Penny. Wade regarded her steadily. Whatever you're running from, Miss Dawson, it's not here. You have my word. Something in his voice, a simple honesty that couldn't be feigned, made Mabel want to believe him, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Irving, but I'll stay with my horse. He nodded, not offended. Then I'll bring you some supper from the house. Can't have you going hungry. Before she could object, he was gone, slipping out into the damp night. Left alone, Mabel pressed her forehead against Penny's warm neck, breathing in the familiar scent of horse and leather. What do you think, girl? Is he trustworthy? She whispered. Penny snorted softly, as if to say that was for Mabel to decide. Wade returned 30 minutes later bearing a cloth-covered basket that smelled of fresh bread and something savory. He also carried a rolled blanket under one arm. Martha, my brother's wife, insisted, he explained, setting down the basket. There's stew, biscuits, and some dried apple tart. The generosity was unexpected, and Mabel found herself fighting tears. Please thank her for me. Will do. Wade placed the blanket on a clean patch of hay. Nights get cold here, even in summer. As he arranged a makeshift bed for her, Mabel noticed a long scar running down his left forearm, disappearing beneath his rolled-up shirt sleeve. A battle wound, perhaps, or the mark of a life spent working with cattle and horses. Your family is very kind to strangers, she observed as he stepped back. Wade's expression was thoughtful. When I came back from the war, I was different, saw things no boy should see, did things too. He paused, his eyes distant. Found myself wandering, taking work where I could. One night during a blizzard, a family took me in, fed me, gave me a warm place to sleep when they had little themselves. His gaze returned to her. Changed the course of my life, that simple kindness. Mabel unwrapped the basket, the rich aroma of beef stew making her stomach growl. So you pay it forward. Try to, he smiled, tipping his hat. I'll leave you to your meal. If you need anything, the house is just beyond that stand of cottonwoods. You can see the lantern light through the trees. After he'd gone, Mabel ate ravenously, savoring the hearty stew and soft, buttery biscuits. The apple tart was a surprise of sweetness, and she found herself wondering about the woman who'd prepared it, this Martha, wife to Wade's brother. The rain stopped entirely as she finished eating, and stars appeared in patches between the clearing clouds. Mabel stepped outside the barn to wash at the water pump, the cool night air refreshing against her skin. As she returned to the barn, movement at the tree line caught her attention. A man on horseback watching the barn. Her heart raced until she recognized Wade's silhouette, making a patrol of his property before turning in for the night, keeping guard, she realized, not over her but for her. Sleep came more easily than it had in months, wrapped in the borrowed blanket with Penny's soft breathing nearby, and the knowledge that Wade Irving was the kind of man who kept watch while strangers slept. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the barn slats and the distant sounds of a working ranch coming to life. Mabel woke disoriented, then remembered where she was. She quickly splashed water on her face and rebraided her hair before tending to Penny. The barn door creaked open, and Mabel tensed until Wade's familiar figure appeared, carrying another basket. Good morning, he greeted. Brought you breakfast. Martha's curious about you but understood when I said you valued your privacy. Mabel accepted the basket, which contained steaming biscuits, ham, and a jar of preserves. Your sister-in-law is too generous. That's Martha, Wade agreed with affection. Been trying to fatten me up for years. As they shared the breakfast, Wade mentioned casually, got word a cattle buyer's coming through next week. We'll be driving some stock to the railhead in 2 days. Could use an extra hand if you're not in a hurry to reach Montana. Mabel stilled. Are you offering me work, Mr. Irving? Seems you know horses and we're short-handed with Miguel laid up with a broken ankle. He shrugged. Pays fare $3 a day plus meals. The offer was tempting. Her funds were dwindling, and a few days' delay wouldn't matter if she earned enough to see her through the next leg of her journey. I don't have much experience with cattle, she admitted. Wade's smile was reassuring. You can ride fence and help with camp duties, nothing too taxing. The caution that had kept her alive these past months warned against staying in one place too long. But something about Wade Irving's straightforward manner made her want to trust him. 3 days, she agreed finally. Then I'll continue north. His expression brightened. Good. I'll introduce you to the rest of the outfit after breakfast. The outfit turned out to be Wade's brother William, a stockier, more serious version of Wade with the same blue eyes his wife Martha, a round-faced woman with a ready smile, and 2 ranch hands, an older man named Hank and a young Mexican-American called Tomás. William Irving regarded her with skepticism until Wade vouched for her horsemanship. Martha welcomed her warmly, insisting she stay in the small guest room rather than the barn. Nonsense, sleeping with the horses when there's a perfectly good bed, Martha declared. Brooks no argument as she showed Mabel to a small but clean room with a real featherbed and hand-sewn quilt. That first day passed in a flurry of activity as Mabel helped prepare for the cattle drive. Though she kept to herself, she found the physical labor satisfying after so many weeks of uncertainty on the trail. By sunset, she'd earned approving nods from William and Hank as she helped mend tack and sort supplies. At dinner, seated at the long wooden table in the Irvings' kitchen, Mabel found herself drawn into conversation despite her resolve to maintain distance. Wade tells me you're headed to Montana, William remarked. Passing a platter of roast chicken, Mabel nodded. I've heard there's opportunity there. Family waiting for you? Martha asked. No family, Mabel replied, the familiar ache of loss rising in her throat. Wade caught her eye from across the table, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. Well, you're welcome here as long as you need, Martha said firmly. Lord knows we could use another woman's company in this house full of men. That night in the unfamiliar comfort of her real bed, Mabel replayed the day's events. The Irvings seemed genuinely good people, but she'd been fooled before. Her fingers traced the ridge of scar tissue at her collarbone, a permanent reminder of misplaced trust. The next morning, Mabel rose early to help Martha prepare breakfast for the men. As they worked side by side, Martha's chatter filled the kitchen. Been a blessing having Wade back these past years, she said as she kneaded biscuit dough. When he first returned from the war, William worried for him, too quiet, too haunted. She glanced at Mabel. Some wounds don't show on the outside, you know. Mabel did know. Her own invisible wounds ran deeper than the physical ones. He seems at peace now, Mabel observed, thinking of Wade's steady presence. Martha smiled. Land does that for some people. Gives them purpose, roots them when they're adrift. She patted Mabel's hand, leaving a dusting of flour. Works for more than just cowboys, you know. Before Mabel could respond, the men filed in for breakfast and the conversation turned to the day's work. The cattle drive began at dawn the following day. Mabel rode drag position alongside Tomás, eating dust as they kept the stragglers moving. By midday, her muscles ached pleasantly from the unaccustomed work, and she found herself enjoying the rhythm of the drive despite the heat and dust. At the noon break, Wade brought her a tin cup of coffee. Holding up all right, she nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. It's honest work. That it is. He studied her with those clear blue eyes. You ride like you were born to it. Told you my father raised horses, she reminded him. You did. He settled beside her on a fallen log. Was that in Kansas City? Mabel froze. She'd never mentioned Kansas City to him. Wade held up a hand. Saw the newspaper lining your saddlebag yesterday when you were getting something. Kansas City Star, her heart pounded. You were going through my things? No, he said firmly. Would never do that. Saw it by chance when you had your bag open. Mabel stood, suddenly feeling exposed. I should check on Penny. Mabel, his voice stopped her. Whatever happened there, it doesn't matter here. You don't owe me or anyone an explanation. She turned back, searching his face for deception but finding only sincerity. How can you say that? She asked quietly. You don't know what I might have done. Wade stood too, keeping a respectful distance. I know enough about people to recognize when they're running from injustice, not justice. His voice softened. I've seen that look in your eyes before in the mirror after Antietam. The mention of the bloody Civil War battle made Mabel think again of the scar on his arm, the weight of experience that belied his youthful appearance. I'm not what you think, Wade, she said finally. I'm not some innocent wronged, he shrugged. Never claimed you were. But I know a survivor when I see one. He gestured to where the cattle grazed. We should get back to it. Rain coming later by the look of those clouds. As predicted, rain caught them late afternoon, a sudden downpour that sent the cattle into a restless bunch. Mabel found herself riding hard alongside Wade and William as they worked to prevent a stampede, the exhilaration of the moment driving away her earlier discomfort. By the time they made camp that evening, the rain had passed, leaving a glorious sunset painting the western sky. Hank cooked beans and salt pork over the campfire while the others settled the herd for the night. Mabel took first watch with Wade, riding the perimeter of the bedded-down cattle under a canopy of stars. The night was peaceful, broken only by the occasional lowing of a cow or the soft hoofbeats of their horses. "Beautiful country," Mabel remarked, gazing at the silhouettes of distant mountains against the starlit sky. "Gets in your blood," Wade agreed. "First time I saw this valley, I knew I'd found home. How did you know?" she asked, genuinely curious. He considered this. "Hard to explain, just something settled in me that had been restless since the war." He glanced at her. "You ever felt that sense of belonging somewhere?" "Once," she admitted. "Long time ago." They rode in companionable silence until Mabel gathered her courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "Why did you offer me work, Wade? You don't know me." His answer came without hesitation, "Because you needed it and I had it to give." Then, with a slight smile, "And because Penny's a fine horse who deserves an owner who knows her worth." The simple honesty of his response warmed something inside Mabel that had been cold for too long. When they returned to camp to wake Tamaz and Hank for the next watch, Wade paused beside her as she prepared to sleep. "Mabel," he said softly, "whatever's hunting you and I suspect something is you've got friends here now." The offer of friendship, given so freely, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She turned away before he could see them, murmuring a thank you as she sought the shelter of her bedroll. The next day's drive was uneventful until mid-afternoon when a rattlesnake spooked William's horse, sending him crashing to the ground. The horse bolted, and several cattle broke from the herd, heading for a ravine. Without thinking, Mabel wheeled Penny around and raced after the strays, cutting them off before they could scatter further. She guided them back to the main herd with skill that drew appreciative whistles from Hank and Tamaz. Wade caught up to her as she finished rounding up the last steer. "That was impressive riding." "Just did what needed doing," she replied, but couldn't help feeling proud at his approval. William's all right bruised pride more than anything. His horse came back too. By sunset, they reached the holding pens near the railhead where the cattle would be loaded the following day. The small settlement nearby offered a saloon and general store, and after settling the herd, the men headed for a drink. "Join us," Wade invited Mabel. She shook her head. "I'll stay with the cattle." "Already arranged for the stock agent's boy to watch them," he smiled. "Come on, you've earned a cold beer and a real meal." The saloon was busy but not rowdy, filled with ranch hands and railroad workers enjoying an evening's respite. Mabel felt conspicuous as the only woman besides the barmaid, but Wade steered her to a corner table where William and the others waited. As they ate beef stew and fresh bread, Mabel gradually relaxed, even laughing at Hank's outrageous stories of his younger days driving cattle up from Texas. "To our newest hand," William proposed a toast, his earlier skepticism apparently forgotten. "Finest horsemanship I've seen in a woman." Mabel raised her beer in acknowledgement, feeling a strange sense of belonging she hadn't expected. Later, as they walked back to their camp, Wade fell into step beside her. "William's not one for empty praise," he remarked. "You impressed him today." "It was good to be useful," Mabel admitted, "to have a purpose beyond just running." Wade was quiet for a moment. "You know, we could use someone with your skills at the ranch. Permanently, I mean." Mabel stopped walking, surprised by the offer. "You can't be serious, you barely know me." "I know enough," he countered. "You're hardworking, honest, good with animals. The rest your past, your reasons for heading north, that's your business until you decide otherwise." His offer stirred something dangerous in Mabel's heart hope. "I can't stay, Wade, it's not safe." In the moonlight, his expression was solemn, because of whatever happened in Kansas City. She nodded, unable to elaborate. "Cottonwood Springs is a long way from Kansas City," he said quietly, "and the Irving Ranch even further. Distance isn't always enough," she whispered. Wade stepped closer, his voice low and intense. "Mabel, I don't know what or who you're running from." But I do know that sometimes running isn't the answer. Sometimes you need to stand your ground with people at your back who care what happens to you. And you care, she challenged, after 3 days. Yes, the simplicity of his answer disarmed her. I do. Back at camp, Mabel lay awake long after the others had fallen asleep, Wade's words echoing in her mind. The idea of stopping, of building something rather than just fleeing, was tempting beyond measure. But the memory of Edward Blackett's rage-contorted face, of his vow to find her no matter where she ran, kept her from surrendering to the temptation. By morning, her resolve had hardened. She would help deliver the cattle, collect her pay, and continue north as planned. It was the only way to ensure her safety, and now the safety of the Irvings as well. The cattle's sale went smoothly, with William securing a good price from the buyer. As they prepared to return to the ranch, Mabel approached Wade with her decision. I appreciate the job offer, she said, keeping her voice steady. But I need to continue my journey. Disappointment flashed in his eyes, quickly masked. I understand, at least let us replenish your supplies before you go. She accepted gratefully, and they rode back to the ranch in contemplative silence. Martha expressed genuine regret when told of Mabel's plans to leave the following morning, but busied herself packing food for the journey. That evening, Mabel helped with chores around the ranch, memorizing the peaceful scene of cattle grazing against the backdrop of mountains, the sound of William and Martha's children playing by the creek, the way the setting sun gilded the weathered boards of the barn. After dinner, Wade asked if she'd like to see the rest of the property before she left. They rode out as twilight deepened, cresting a hill that overlooked the entire valley. My favorite spot, Wade said as they dismounted. You can see all the way to the foothills from here. Mabel breathed in the cool evening air, fighting an unexpected sense of loss. It's beautiful, Wade. You've built something wonderful here. We have, he agreed, but it's still growing. He turned to face her directly. Every good thing starts small, Mabel, a ranch, a friendship, a new life. She couldn't meet his gaze. Some things can't grow when they're poisoned at the root. You're not poisoned, he said firmly. Wounded maybe, bruised, but not beyond healing. The perceptiveness of his words struck her like a physical blow. You don't know what I've done. Wade's hand reached for hers, tentative but warm. Then tell me. And suddenly, Mabel wanted to. The secret had festered inside her for so long, the weight of it crushing. Wade's steady presence offered something she hadn't dared hope for, understanding without judgment. I killed a man, she said, the words falling into the gathering darkness between them. In Kansas City. Wade's hand tightened on hers, but he didn't pull away. Tell me why. The story spilled from her in halting fragments: her marriage at 19 to Edward Blackett, a respected businessman whose public charm masked private cruelty, the escalating violence over 4 years, her desperate escape attempts thwarted each time. And finally, that terrible night when he'd come at her with a knife, drunk and enraged over an imagined slight. I got the knife away from him somehow, she whispered. And then, he was coming at me again and I stabbed him. I didn't mean to kill him, just stop him, but there was so much blood. She pulled down her collar slightly, revealing the jagged scar at her collarbone. He gave me this that same night. Would have been worse if I hadn't fought back. Wade's eyes, fixed on the scar, darkened with anger. Self-defense isn't murder, Mabel. The law might not see it that way. His family certainly doesn't, she shivered. His brother's a marshal. He's looking for me, promised to see me hang. Wade was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. What did you do after? My neighbor helped me. She'd heard the fights, seen my bruises. She got me out of the city that night while her husband... Mabel swallowed hard. While her husband buried Edward in the woods outside town, by morning I was on a train south with what little I could carry. And you've been running ever since, she nodded. 3 months, always looking over my shoulder. Wade released her hand, and for a moment, Mabel thought he was withdrawing in disgust. Instead, he removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. What if you stopped running? He asked finally. What if you stayed here where people know you, care about you? This land is vast, Mabel, and we take care of our own in Cottonwood Springs. I can't ask you to take on my troubles, she protested. If Edward's brother tracked me here, he'd bring trouble to your family. Let him try, Wade said, an edge to his voice she hadn't heard before. This is our land, our community. One vindictive marshal from Kansas City won't find it easy to throw accusations around here. His confidence should have been reassuring, but Mabel had seen firsthand the lengths to which the Blackett family would go for vengeance. I'm not worth the risk, Wade. That's where you're wrong. His hand cupped her cheek gently. You're worth fighting for, Mabel Dawson, worth protecting, worth loving if you'd allow it. The word loving hung in the air between them, unexpected and transformative. Mabel searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity in his steady gaze. How can you say that? She whispered. After everything I've told you, because I've seen your courage, your kindness, your strength. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. Because in 3 days, you've shown me more of your true heart than most people reveal in years. My heart is broken, Wade, bruised beyond recognition. His smile was gentle. Then let me try to mend it, not just for now, but for as long as it takes, forever if you'll have me. The simplicity of his offer and the depth of feeling behind it undid her final defenses. Mabel leaned into his touch, allowing herself to trust in the possibility of safety, of belonging, of love. I'm afraid, she admitted. I know, he acknowledged. But you don't have to face that fear alone anymore. As the stars emerged above them, Wade's lips found hers in a kiss that promised shelter from the storm of her past, not by running from it, but by standing firm together against whatever came. Stay, he murmured against her hair afterward. Give us a chance. Give yourself a chance. In that moment, on that hilltop overlooking what could be her new home, Mabel made her choice. She would stop running. Whatever came, whether peaceful years building a life with this man who saw her soul's bruises and loved her anyway, or the reckoning she had feared for so long, she would face it standing tall, no longer alone. Yes, she said simply. I'll stay. Wade's answering smile held all the warmth and promise of sunrise after the longest night. 1 year later, Mabel stood on that same hilltop, Wade's arm around her waist as they watched spring calves gamboling in the valley below. The Irving ranch had prospered, and so had she, finding purpose in work and healing in love freely given. The threat from her past had materialized briefly, a letter from the Kansas City marshal inquiring about a woman matching her description, but William's friend, the territorial judge, had intervened. An investigation had revealed years of documented abuse, neighbors willing to testify to Edward's violence, and sufficient evidence to close the case as self-defense. Penny seems to like that new filly of hers, Wade observed, nodding toward where Mabel's chestnut mare grazed beside her 3-month-old foal. She's a natural mother, Mabel agreed, leaning into the solid warmth of her husband's embrace. Wade's fingers played with the gold band on her left hand, placed there 6 months earlier in a simple ceremony beside the creek. Any regrets? He asked, a question he still posed occasionally, as if to reassure himself that she was truly content. Mabel turned in his arms, meeting his gaze directly, only that I almost rode away that day. His kiss was as tender as the first they'd shared on this hilltop, his arms as strong and sure. When they parted, Mabel rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I have something to tell you, she said softly. Wade waited, patient as always. Martha confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby come winter. His breath caught, and when she looked up, his eyes shone with joyful disbelief. Truly. Mabel nodded, laughing as he lifted her in a careful embrace, spinning her in a circle of pure happiness. I never thought I could have this, she confessed when he set her down. A home, love, a family of my own. Wade pressed his forehead to hers. You deserve all of it and more, Mabel Irving. As they rode back to the ranch together, Mabel reflected on how far she'd come from that rainy evening when she'd sought shelter in a stranger's barn. The bruises on her soul hadn't vanished entirely, such wounds never did, but they had faded, transformed by Wade's patient love from marks of shame to emblems of survival. She had stopped running and in doing so had found her way home.